gas companies that are based here, so they've gone to protect them, as well as the governorate headquarters and the port here. The situation where I'm standing now is still chaotic. I don't know if you heard those couple of sounds of bangs in the background. The smoke is really thick because several big buildings are ablaze. Among them are businesses belonging to a member of the National Democratic Party's political committee, Mohammed Abul Ainain, his name. Locals here tell me he is notorious and extremely disliked here. Another liquor store belonging to someone they say is close to the government has been set ablaze. And a famous retail shop or department store called Omar Effendi. Now this store used to be a public store back in the day and then was sold to the private sector, so it shows you, the resentment in terms of like lack of jobs and what the people claim is Mubarak's tenure of taking away the wealth of the people and giving it to the private sector. So the situation on the ground remains chaotic to say the least. There is no sign of any police or army in the center of town, but there is signs of thousands of people still gathered despite the fires that are taking place. There is no signs of any fire engines either trying to put that out. Lauren.
Jamal, thank you very much indeed for bringing us the very latest live there from Suez. Well, Egypt is a close ally of the US, as was Tunisia. Well, let's get an idea of how worrying this all could be for Washington. Nick Spicer is there for us. So, Nick, give us a broad brush appraisal of what the Obama administration's response has been so far to this Egyptian chaos.
Well, White House statements are moments away, but Hillary Clinton, the American Secretary of State, has already spoken, and she said, ratcheting up the volume, that the United States recognizes there are deep grievances in Egyptian society, but she said to the Egyptian government that violence was not the way to deal with them. Now, Egypt is the third biggest recipient of foreign aid from the United States. It's a major military partner of this country. The United States sees it as its most reliable and biggest Arab ally in a part of the world that it feels is strategic to its energy interests and to peace in the world. So if things go wrong in Egypt, then things go very wrong for American geopolitical strategy. And the feeling here is that some tectonic shifts may be taking place. Egypt is a friend of Israel, which America, of course, likes a lot, and it also has a large military presence which allows oil to flow through the Suez Canal, which is, of course, in Egypt. So those are just some of the elements that people here in Washington have in mind as they watch events unfold on TV.
And you mentioned it being a sort of strategic ally in the region. Is there a concern that there could be a domino effect and that if Egypt falls down in that series of dominoes, then it could get worse in the rest of the region? I think that is fairly safe to say. Things started in Tunisia and now they've spread to Egypt. Eyes here in Washington in the think tanks at State Department and the CIA are on Yemen now. Street demonstrations in Jordan, which is a key U.S. ally as well. They're all watching where things are going. Now, the decisions will be taken really based on where the United States' strategic interests lie. Barack Obama will also have to keep up his foreign policy objective of promoting democracy. Now, those two could be in conflict. The Americans, and nobody really knows what the outcome of the events in Egypt will bring. Will it bring about a new democratically elected government? Could it be the Muslim Brotherhood which gets into power, which would displease people here in Washington who fear a sort of Islamist wave taking over different Muslim countries, Arab countries? So it's really early days, but people are on tenterhooks here, seeing that things may really be changing in an important part of the world for the United States. It's interesting that we've heard from when Hillary Clinton spoke, she talked about the need for a dialogue between the government and the people. At this stage, that's not looking very likely, and it's interesting that we haven't actually heard from President Mubarak so far, even though there was a news conference or at least a speech mooted earlier in the day that never materialised. Where do you think they think the dialogue can lie at the moment?
I think there's probably a lot of dialogue that we're not hearing about between the State Department and Cairo. I think the phone lines, we can safely say, are probably burning up. The Americans are putting pressure on Hosni Mubarak's people basically to
concede a little bit, to show some sign of listening to the Egyptian people. I can't speculate as to why the speech that was mooted didn't take place, but I certainly think the Americans are putting a lot of pressure on the Egyptian president to show that he's listening to the people in the street and to not let things get out of control, because a lot is at stake for the United States. But it really has to be underlined, this is a huge balancing act for Barack Obama. If he takes a statement strongly one way or the other, he can be seen as either propping up a man seen as an autocrat in large swaths of the Egyptian population, or as embracing a people power wave against a strategic ally of the United States. There's lots to lose if he weighs in and bets wrong. So there's calls here for him to embrace, for instance, on the left of the American media, the people power movement, but the people on the right in the United States are saying, look, it's a steadfast ally. It keeps things nice with Israel. You shouldn't disrupt things. It's a very difficult decision for Barack Obama to take, and I think that's why we're not really hearing a lot from him now, although he's hearing an awful lot from his advisors as we speak.
Indeed. Thanks very much indeed. Nick Spicer reporting live for us there from Washington. Well, Cairo is a huge city of 8 million people, so let's give you an idea of where the protests have been happening. In Cairo, the 6th of October bridge is where protesters have been gathering. It's been called the spinal cord of Cairo, with 500,000 people passing over it every day. Al-Azhar Mosque is a major centre for religion and theology. It's here that the uprising began in 1919 against the British, and more protests in a neighbourhood near the presidential palace. Demonstrators calling for an end to President Hosni Mubarak's rule. Then a clampdown in Tahrir Square, literally translated. That means Liberation Square. It's been cut off by police, but crowds have been trying to get into the area. Well, Mohammed al-Baradei, the former head of the IAEA, who's now a leading Egyptian pro-democracy advocate, joined the demonstrators.
We want him to quit, but we have to ensure continuity. We have to ensure an orderly transition of power, and how we are going to do that, we will have to discuss. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'm ready to, and the people are ready to engage with the regime, discuss with the regime how to ensure transition, a smooth transition. But the fact that he has to leave, the fact that we have to have a new Egypt, there is no question about it.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by Wafik Moustafa, who's the chair of the Conservative Arab Network. And thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come in and talk to us. Tell me initially what you think of what's happening at the moment in Egypt.
I think it's a great turning point, huge opportunity for Egypt and for the Arab world and for the Muslim world to show a change. If you can turn Egypt into democracy, into a stable country, not just a police state as it has been for 60 years, I think it's a tremendous event in history for Britain, for America, and above all, for the ordinary man in the street in Cairo.
Okay, so what about President Mubarak? Why haven't we heard from him, do you think?
I think President Mubarak is a very arrogant man, extremely arrogant, with a lot of people around him, his wife, his 2 children. They just took the country for granted. And he's shocked. I could imagine he's shocked, and he is pretty confused, and he doesn't know what to do.
So I mean, the role of the army in all this is going to be critical. We've seen that it's appeared on the streets in various cities throughout Egypt, in some places welcomed, but it's not actually clear what it's there to do, is it? What do you think the army is going to do?
I think what I've seen, the pictures a few moments ago on Al Jazeera, it is not the British Army, it's a presidential guard, which is basically the guard for the president of Egypt, which is about 22,000 strong. It has got its tanks, even it has got its jets. It's a very strong, it does not have any connection with the Egyptian army.
But at this stage, is it following the orders of President Mubarak, or has it gone rogue?
It is very unclear, but I could imagine it's the only part of the army he can control. It seems to me he has no control on the army, and I could imagine the army going to move on and get rid of Mubarak, or he probably will leave the country. It's a very difficult and very dark situation in Egypt. He's got his own Boeing 777. As you know, it's a very luxurious aircraft.
So do you think that it's likely that will we be in a situation like we were in Tunisia, where suddenly the president disappears off in the plane? Is that what you expect to happen?
That's a big possibility, because what other choices will he have? He will be tried. There's huge wealth have been taken out of Egypt. assets been taken abroad. As you could know, he's got real estates, he and his family, in hundreds of millions. Some people say billions, but it's huge amount of money which the Egyptian poor needed to build hospitals, to build the schools, and I'm sure the Egyptian people will not let it go. And it is a moment, a Ceausescu moment in a way, for Egyptians and for the Arab world and for the moderate Islam. By the way, it's not the Muslim Brotherhood in the street, it is the ordinary person in the street, middle class, who is interested in the net, who is interested to talk to people, who are interested in finding decent jobs. And you could see them, they're all people who earn very little. A doctor in Egypt earn very little, earn about £50 a month, less than road sweeper in Gaza. It's an appalling situation, and okay. Mubarak should take responsibility. Okay, Dr. Moustafa, you make your point very forcefully. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you. And now we can join Dan Nolan again, who's on the phone for us from Cairo. So Dan, I gather you've got some more information for us.
Yes, I do. You were asking before about the relationship between the protesters and the military. At the moment, down here in front of us, we can see a military vehicle, an armoured personnel carrier, that has been stopped by the protesters. It's been stopped right in its tracks and is now been surrounded by around 400 or 500 protesters who have been standing in front of it, chanting down with the regime. Some appear to have tried to climb on board this vehicle. The vehicle, they must be in communication with each other now, because they have stopped trying to what would appear to be attack it, but they are still there surrounding it. It can't move at all. It's turned its lights off and has sort of given up on trying to move forward or back, because it is surrounded by around 500 people on all directions. Now, this would indicate that it's certainly not a friendly exchange. It's certainly not flag waving to each other like we were seeing earlier tonight. And just looking across from there is a constant flood of protesters. This intersection that we're looking out over is one of the key intersections of Cairo. It connects the October 6th bridge with downtown Cairo, and one road leads back down to Tahrir Square, and this is just being flooded with people constantly moving from one direction to the other. All we can hear is a constant chanting of "down with the regime, down with the regime." I can now see more armoured personnel carriers moving down the street from Tahrir Square back down towards this area, the Ramses area, where we are. So it's a constantly changing movement of people. We're seeing a lot of military vehicles coming through, and we're also, as we were discussing earlier, have a fantastic view of the fire that has completely engulfed the National Democratic Party headquarters. It is completely alight. There would appear to be no hope of putting this fire out from this point. And the black smoke that it's producing is wafting through across the entire city.
Dan, we've seen, watching pictures just now of many people who've been injured. We've had one report of around 870 injured. Presumably that's a lot to do with the tear gas canisters being fired.
It certainly would be, but the noises that we are hearing coming from echoing across the city that appear to be originating somewhere around Tahrir Square or a little bit further away. That noise is being fired at such a rapid pace that it has got to be something more than tear gas canisters. And then you may have just heard an even louder explosion then, which we've been hearing a little earlier in the evening, that we believe are sound grenades. To try and stun people and clear a path. But yeah, it would certainly. We've got, from where we are 24 floors above downtown